just a chance to sort of share things, because right now it seems like, we've got smartphones and technology, and we do one of two things. We either just accept it wholesale, and we're just like, okay, we've got it, or my kids got it, or whatever. You just have it, and you use it because you can. Or the other one is like, we've got it, and then we just complain about it. And so I think it's just fruitful just to have the conversation, because I don't know how many kind of good, constructive conversations there are about technology, smartphones, and social media. If there either isn't conversation, it's just sort of, like I said, accepted, or it's just complained about. And neither one of those is really fruitful. There's got to be, complaining's fine only if it's directed towards something good. There's no sense in complaining unless it's going to get us somewhere good. So, and it's something easy to kind of have that. So that's sort of by way of saying, as we kind of go through today, the goal is to just increase our knowledge about kind of the effects or the reality of social media and smartphones and stuff in our culture and what that's all about. And then to talk in a constructive way. There will be discussion opportunities. So to talk in a constructive way about the impact it can have or does have in our lives. And so I would just kind of caution to try not to fall down that road of just sort of complaining or venting about different things. So at least, if you're it's great to be critical, but that criticalness needs to be directed towards some sort of good. It has to, we're trying to do something constructive. So if we could just have a complaint session, it would be a lot of fun, but, but it wouldn't be constructive. So first thing, I guess, I'd like to just pose a couple different questions. The first is, what is social media? And then the second question, give examples of social media. So I would say those are two different questions. So the first question, what is social media? So don't just give me examples of what's out there, but what is, kind of, if you were to define social media, how would you define it?
Ways to communicate electronically.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, that's a good way to do it. So the key is communication. And then, there's sort of those two parts, the communication part, but then the electronically part is the other part too. So of course, social, there's been socialization going on in the world forever. And so we're social people, we're social beings. God created us to be social. He created us to be in community and communion with other people. In order to do that, there has to be some social element. God himself is a social being. He is a Father, he is a Son, and he is a Holy Spirit. And they have a community of persons that makes up the Trinity. So God himself is social. And when he created human beings in his image and likeness, he created us as social to socialize, to have community, to sort of have that socialization. The media aspect, of course, is the electronically or through the medium of media, I guess you could say, medium of media. That doesn't really sound very good. But anyway, so that's the socialization. We haven't had that forever, but of course it's been developing. So that's a fair, I think, background of what social media is. Give me examples of social media. Yeah.
Email.
Facebook. Good example. Yeah. Email. So email's been around a bit longer than Facebook. Mm-hmm. Anybody remember when email first came out? I don't remember what year it was, but was it it would have been late 90s, mid 90s, even before that? Okay, so it's been out there for a while. Not everybody had it right away. Facebook is a good example as well. So that's been out a little bit less longer. The first time I remember hearing about it was my first year of college. And at that time it was just college students. It was just open to college students. Other examples of social media?
Hashtag.
Yeah, that would be a sort of a way to say something, a hashtag, which, would be Twitter. Would be
Twitter,
yeah. Other forms of social media? Instagram, yeah.
Instagram.
Any other you can think of?
Snapchat.
Yeah. Snapchat's kind of seems to be the big one these days. So, so yeah. What's that?
Texting.
Texting, another great example, yeah. So texting's been around for When did I send my first text? I'm trying to think how old I was. I think back to when I got my first phone. It's hard to remember that. But yeah, texting, of course, would be social media. Other ideas? There's a few more out there. Even like a blog would be an example of social media. Somebody just blogging about their life. Yeah, even a web page for whatever. There's a lot of different, there's sort of commercial web pages, but there's also sort of social web pages where people can have sort of conversations. So all of them kind of fit that definition, and all of them do a good thing. I mean, we talked about how we're social beings, and so we need to socialize. We need socialization. Being isolated is a very bad thing. Isolation is not healthy for us as human beings. Isolation is really bad. A couple key examples. This school shooting down in Florida. The man that did that, there was kind of a lot going on in his life, but there was a couple things I was watching that suggested he felt isolated. He didn't feel connected to a lot of the other people in school for a number of different reasons. But that sense of isolation can kind of get us to lose touch with reality and with who we are as human beings, who we're supposed to be connected and social. So isolation is not a good thing. Another thing is in prisons, to be kept in isolation or to be put in the hole, solitary confinement, that's a punishment. Now, prison's not, I don't think any of prison's all that great, but for punishment in prison, of course, they put you in isolation where you can't communicate. One of the biggest reasons, I mean, I don't think it's a very big area, so I'm sure it's uncomfortable, but I would assume one of the biggest parts of that suffering is that you can't talk to anybody else. You have no socialization. As human beings, we need that. We crave that. That's a part of who we are. And so those are just two examples of how and why isolation is a bad thing. Socialization is a good thing. So it kind of seems on the outset that the more we can communicate, the better it is for us as human beings. The rest of the day we'll talk about whether or not that's the case. And you won't leave with any concrete conclusions. Well, maybe you will, but I probably won't. Okay. Discussion. How has communication technology in the past impacted our world or society? So I'm giving some examples over the past years, like the printing press and books is a form of media, not so much socialization, but that kind of technology. What we're kind of focusing on right now is just technology. There's been technological advances going on for a long time. The modern mail system, even inventions of different things, the automobile, that changed socializations in different ways. So in your tables, just for maybe 2 or 3 minutes, I just want you to discuss how communication technology, or technology in general, has impacted us for the last thousands of years, how those technologies have impacted us. Good, bad, maybe some good, maybe some bad, but just take a couple minutes and talk amongst yourselves and talk about how that's impacted us.
We have the fireworks.
All righty. So we'll bring it back together. I'd love to hear some of your ideas or some of your thoughts.
That's all right.
Yeah. Tell me a bit about technology in the past and how it's affected us. What were some of your ideas?
First you had smoke signals, and that wasn't very good.
That's right. Not very effective.
Then you had like the Pony Express thing,
Sure.
which was slow.
Sure.
Then you had a telegraph, which in order to send one of those, you had to go someplace to do it.
Yep.
And I don't know, like from the telegraph to the telephone, I don't know how long that was. There maybe was some stuff in between there, but
Right.
the thing is nowadays it's so much easier to, I mean, in 2 seconds you can send a message, whereas years ago it took a bunch of effort to.
Yeah. Yeah, when they were switching from like the mail system, the Pony Express, to the telegraph or the telephone, what were people saying then? Were people, I mean, I wasn't around then, not that you were either, but what were people, I don't know, were they kind of concerned about that as well, saying, oh, that seems crazy, or
They had to change their lives. For instance, what I can do is, when my grandpa and grandma had their farm, the Verzette farm, the Pony Express came in on the north side of their house and came around and dropped the pony thing down, and then they went down across the creek and then down towards Walpole.
Sure.
Then when the telephone came, and that came out, because that was called Nebben at that time.
Okay.
then when the trains or the telephones started coming in, that was up on the other side, so that they had to move it on this side, and 24 came through.
Sure.
So,
So
and
yeah,
then with the school up here too, from the other side of the creek,
right.
because that road was no longer there for the Pony Express. They needed a different direction. The same way with the Indians when they walked their path.
Sure. So it changed their lives. They had to adapt in order to make it work. Right. Yeah.
But the old telephones, we had to go, folks had to go uptown, say, look, it's
Sure.
the switchboard operator
Sure.
to make a long distance call.
Right.
All you could do was call your neighbors always.
Yeah. And at that time, that was it was revolutionary to be able
Right.
to do that. That it wasn't a tin can with a string, but that you could actually go miles. I remember when I was growing up on the farm, we had a party line. You probably remember party lines, and so you could listen in on your neighbors, phone line, and everything like that. So when we weren't on the farm anymore, and we didn't have a party line, that was revolutionary. I remember as a kid, that was a big change. So, but yeah, a lot of that has taken adapting in different ways, and maybe not all that great at first, or who knows kind of how it's been. But anyway, we've had to adapt in a lot of different ways. Yeah. So anyway, yeah, it's interesting to think about how technology's gone. It does seem to be getting faster and faster. How quickly technology is moving along. So for thousands of years, communication had kind of been fairly slowly developing. And then just within the last few decades, it's quick.
I think it's going too fast for a general.
Well, Robert, we'll talk about that. Yeah, it's plausible to maybe suggest that we've had to adapt in the past, and to adapt well is a very difficult thing to do. It's even more difficult the faster it goes. If things are changing faster, it's harder to adapt well. So we've had to adapt in the past. We've done it before. We can do it again. But if all of a sudden technology is moving so fast that human beings can't adapt, can't use it well, then are we getting ourselves into some trouble? That's not a question for you to answer yet. We'll get there though. Okay, what else am I going to talk about today? All right, what we consume affects how we live our life. So there's beer and chicken wings up here. So if I had a choice of what to consume for every meal, it would be beer and chicken wings. But that would affect me in many different ways. It would affect, perhaps my health in general. It would affect how I feel. I don't always feel great after spicy chicken wings. But yeah, over a long period of time, consuming that is going to have a huge impact on me, on my health, on my probably cardiovascular health especially, and that's not going to, the outcome's not going to be very good. Initially, it's like, yeah, this is great, of course it's great. So what we consume, and we see that very clearly with what we consume physically. What we consume through our eyes, through our ears, into our brain, that is not seen so clearly. The effect of that is not seen so clearly. But we don't just consume things with our mouths. We consume things with our eyes, with our ears as well. And what that affects is really more important than, okay, if I've got a bad ulcer or a heart problem, that's not a good thing. But if my mind, if my heart in the spiritual sense, or my soul is unhealthy, that's a much bigger problem. And so that's kind of the healthiness that we're talking about here. So I don't plan on eating beer and chicken wings for every meal because I care about my body. I care about being healthy. Similarly, we kind of have to have that same concern or that same care for our spiritual well-being and who we are as human beings. To be a good person, a healthy person, spiritually, psychologically, we have to be careful what we consume. We can't just consume junk food all the time. Although it's just like a kid would want to consume junk food all the time, sometimes we do as well when it comes to media, especially what comes into our eyes and our ears. So anyway, that's my way of that. Alrighty. What we consume on social media. So Facebook's a good example of this, but any media that we get through the internet, we can filter basically what we get. So you can follow certain people on Twitter. You can follow certain people on Facebook. You can subscribe to different YouTube channels. And when you're doing this, you're picking and choosing what you want to hear. And so what you're consuming is not really a well-rounded or well-balanced diet of media. It's just one thing that you want, okay? Chicken wings. Not a well-balanced diet. Similarly, with media, when we're filtering things and just kind of seeing what we want, just listening to this type of person that talks about that, or that type of person that talks about this, it's not a well-balanced diet for us as a human being. Very often we need to hear things, we need to consume things that challenge us, that change our mentality, that tell us something new or different, a different way of thinking. That makes us stronger, that makes us better. It's a well-balanced diet of media in our lives. Oftentimes when we, especially on social media where there's other people's lives that are on display, Facebook or Twitter, all that type of stuff, what we're consuming is the great experiences of other people. And you see all of those great experiences of other people. That can have an impact on us. The frustrations and negativity of others. A lot of times social media sites can just be a forum for people to vent. And as a human being, you can take a certain amount of negativity and a certain amount of venting, but not on a grand scale. We're not meant to take a psychologist or a counselor throughout the course of a day takes on a lot in what they do and how they help. There are certain requirements that certain psychologists, certain counselors can only take on so many clients for their well-being. If they're going to be a good mother or father, husband or wife to their family, they can only take on so much difficulties or challenges or negativity of clients. And we're the same way, and social media sometimes might be able to give us an overload. That would be overconsumption of some negativity and some venting that can go on social media sites. Oftentimes when you see those social media sites, you're not always getting the truth about a person, you're just getting the best highlights of their life. So it makes their life look so much better than ours, doesn't it? Like you look at somebody else, it's like, man, their life's way better than mine is. And that can cause problems as well. The support of others. There's a lot of ways social media has been very supportive. And so a good example of this is on funeral directors' pages. You can comment on like the obituary. Underneath the obituary, you can send a message to those who are the bereaved. And so that's a great way to, people that are states away or whatever normally wouldn't get a card or something like that, or maybe they would get a card. But here they can get a message, so they can have a whole page, a social media page on the funeral director's website to hear some support. And that's true in a lot of different areas. If somebody is able to put up on Facebook that their daughter was diagnosed with leukemia, they can, there'd be a flood of supportive stuff coming in. So there's something positive to that. It's just increasing the quantity of social media. Pictures shared to family and friends. This is a wonderful thing, isn't it? To be able to have pictures of kids and grandkids and be able to share that and put that up there. The downside of it is, you girls will figure this out someday, but like those pictures never leave. They're always there. So pictures of me from college and stuff are still on people's Facebook pages. I'm like, oh dear. So every once in a while somebody stumbles upon it. They're like, Father, you had a weird beard and really long hair. I don't want to think about it. Alrighty, I don't know if you guys have seen this video, but there's this kid that talks about whatever you practice, you'll get really good at. Have you guys seen this at all? It's kind of a quasi-popular video, but this kid's just talking about how, how we practice, or what we practice, we get really good at. So social media can have a big impact on how we do things. So I'm gonna see if I can find his video and show it to you. He's really cute. But he's got a good point.
So my question to you today is, what do you practice every day? What do you practice? Because when you practice, you will get good at. What do you practice? Do you practice joy in your life? Do you practice peace in your life? Do you practice happiness in your life? Or do you practice a lot of complaining? Because if you complain, you will get very good at it. And you will get so good at it that you will find fault with everything. Even when there is no fault that a layman cannot see, you, being an expert, will see it. What do you practice? Do you practice anger? Because if you practice anger, you will get very good at it. And you will get so good at it that the most trivial thing will make you angry. Like sitting in an airplane watching the seed across from you somehow looks better than the one you've been given. And that is so unfair of the airlines. What do you practice? Do you practice being worried? Because if you practice being worried, guess what? You will get very good at it. And you'll get so good at it that everything will worry you, including the buffalo you don't have. So I propose, if this is true that it's a question of practice, then I propose you practice joy. So my question to you today is, what do you practice every day?
We don't need to listen to it again. But,
Oh, good.
yeah, isn't it cute?
So true.
So I think that was based on, there's a mega church, a Protestant mega church, and this guy wrote a book about what do you practice or whatever. So he's kind of basing it on one of his sermons some weekend. But anyway, this kid, I mean, he brings up a good point. It's this Protestant minister preaching that whatever we practice, we'll get really, really good at. And social media, what we do in our socializations, especially on social media, is something that we practice very, very often. A great example of this is it's so easy to comment on other people's pages or to read stuff off of their pages. And that's what we're practicing. Oftentimes that can be negativity. Sometimes it can be gossip. Sometimes it can just be arguing or finding fault in somebody else's political opinion or family situation or whatever the case might be. So if that's what we're doing on social media, then that's becoming a regular practice of ours, and we're going to get really good at being negative, complaining, nitpicking about other people. So he's suggesting that maybe joy or happiness would be a better thing to practice, which isn't to say that can't be done on social media. It definitely can, although it seems oftentimes it's not done as often as some of the other things. So the point, of course, is we have to be careful whatever it is we're practicing. Not just in social media, in our whole life in general, but social media is kind of a hotbed, or it's sort of under a microscope, and so what we do on social media it's so much quicker, we're commenting so much more often, we're seeing and consuming so much more that there's so much more practicing going on there than in our normal life. Like if I go for a run, I might see a few cars or a few people here or there. There's not that much to judge or to be negative about. If I just scroll for 30 seconds through a Facebook page, there are a whole lot of images and comments and things that I see there that I could nitpick or be negative about, or that could drag me down, or that I could be jealous of. So the intensity and the sheer quantity of information and things that could get us to practice, whether it's jealousy or negativity or complaining or whatever it is kind of scary. I mean, how much quantity there is to do that. So maybe there's an appropriate amount to do that as well. So, okay. What do you practice? So on Facebook, this was my experience with Facebook the first time I got it. So you get a Facebook page, and the first thing you do is put down your information, your likes and all that type of stuff. And then you get a picture of yourself and you put that on there so people can see you. And then you can kind of start putting more things on there, and you build your profile. You build your profile, right? Basically what you're doing is trying to make yourself look as good as possible to everyone else. That's narcissism. That's not a good thing to be practicing. Now you don't have to do that, but I don't know too many people that are going to put an ugly picture of themselves up for the whole world to see on Facebook. But it can be, it has the tendency, a lot of those social media sites have the tendency of just we try to get ourselves to look as good as we possibly could. And that's not a great thing. And then we look at other people's and we try to be better than them. And so it's the old, instead of like mowing my lawn and getting my fence to look better than my neighbors over here, I'm trying to get my Facebook page to look better than all of these other people out there. So you're not just keeping up with the Joneses, you're keeping up with the Joneses and the Johnsons and the Schmidts and the whoever else is out there. Everybody. And that's hard to do. So anyway, that's one thing that can be practiced. Narcissism is something that would be, and it's even called Facebook. I mean, it's like how much more surface level or narcissistic you get. But anyway, comparison to others. So you're seeing everybody else's life, and you're not actually seeing their genuine life, but you're seeing their life, and that's to compare ourselves to others in general doesn't do us any favors. And so if we're practicing that on a regular basis on social media, then it might have some negative effects. Trying to be better than others, same thing. Of course we want to be as good as we can, but that whole format of social media seems to a lot of times be getting better than others. For instance, so like Snapchat is a pretty popular one among the kids these days. Do you girls have Snapchat? Nice. It is fun, isn't it? It is an absolute blast.
No, because when the grandchildren come over, or even some of the children, they sit there and play, and you can't even.
Listen, I'm not saying it's good. I'm saying it's fun.
Conversation with them even.
There's a lot of things that are fun that I would say not.
I'm glad I'm over the hill. I had the good life.
But Snapchat has this feature where you can get a streak with somebody else, okay? And so, yeah, look, they're laughing, they know it. And so each day that you send a Snapchat to a person and they send one back to you, that's one day of the streak. So after a while you can build up 30, what's your longest streak right now? 157? What would happen if you got to 8 p.m. today and the person that you have a streak with 157 hadn't sent you a Snapchat yet? Would you start freaking out a little bit?
No, I just let them go.
Okay, good. Yeah, very good. So that's a good example of a healthy streak that's going on. But this can happen that you try to develop these streaks with certain friends, and then if my streak with this person is longer than that person's streak with that person, that means I have a better friendship than that other person does. So I'm trying to have a longer streak than this other person. I've had friends who have called me up at 9 p.m. and said, hey, you haven't sent me a Snapchat today to keep our streak going. They called me to tell me that. And I was like, oh, I'm sorry, we do want to keep the streak going. So it is kind of fun, but what it can do is it can kind of develop this unhealthy, wanting to do this just for the sake of this thing. Anyway, and there's a number of other things now too, not just streaks, but it'll even give you a certain face based on how often you've Snapchatted and stuff like that. So it basically Snapchat judges your friendship for you, and it says, this is how your friendship's doing. Excuse me, I think my friendship is for me to judge how it's going. Like, I know if it's not going very well. I can tell Snapchat that. But anyway, there can be some dangers there. But it is fun, but it's not always good. But it is fun, but it's not always good. Anyway. What's father doing? Okay. Negativity and ranting. So there's just a tendency on social media to be able to be negative and to rant. I've talked a little bit about that. So that's a danger to avoid. All right, so Deacon Andy Yupa he's a transitional deacon. He'll be ordained a priest with Jacob Rouse in May. So he gave up Snapchat for Lent. What do you girls think of that? You're doing that for Lent?
Good.
So he gave up Snapchat for Lent. And what he found out, this is a great quote that he told me one time. Halfway through Lent, he said, I found myself looking at the world. He was looking at the world as if to say, how can I snap this in a way that makes my life look awesome? So he stopped living his life just appreciating things out there, like the beauty of this, or that this is cool, or we went to a hockey game one time, and awesome hockey game going on, we're with friends, it's a pretty neat experience. And this is when he was admitting this, saying, I'm at this hockey game, but I'm just what I think about so often is how I can snap this and take a picture of this to make me look awesome to all my friends. Well, who cares what they think? Just enjoy the hockey game. That's why you're here. So anyway, family would be a good example of this. You could, want to take this picture that make a friend laugh or whatever. It's no, you're with family right now. Be with them. Don't try to be with other people. So anyway, that was a good example. What sins might this practice lead to? I don't know what I was getting at there. Any great thoughts?
Self-centeredness.
Yeah, very self-centered. Very self-centered. Narcissistic, yeah. Yeah.
I have a thought. I wish President Trump would quit tweeting, and then we wouldn't have to listen to the fake news all day.
Yeah, there's a number of problems. But anyway. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what I was getting at with that question, but that's all right. But yeah, you guys identified. There's a lot of stuff there.
How about just with the media, school shootings or any shootings, and then the media has it on for the next 4 hours. they interrupt all other television programming just so that you can get the latest and greatest information
Sure.
on what just took place in one part of the world.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good. How to go into this? As human beings, we just have a propensity to focus on the negative, and we see that in the media. Like you watch the evening news, and there's not much good going on in the world, which is bullcrap, by the way. There is a lot of good things going on in the world, but 98% of the stories are doom and gloom and terrorism and all kinds of different things. And certainly we need to be aware of those things, but as human beings, we just have a propensity and a tendency to focus on the negative and not so much on the positive. When it comes to social media, then, that same propensity comes out in how we're communicating and what we're doing. And so we look at all these things, or we watch these different things, and we just give in to that kind of humanness of focusing on the negative instead of seeing the positive. Of course, there are examples of the opposite, of good examples of uplifting things going on. Radio stations, by the way, have picked up on this, uplifting radio stations. They recognize that form of media, music, and when I was in high school, I loved rock music. 90s rock was the tops. And I still love it. I was at, no, all right, yeah. I was at Nubby's the other night after a finance council meeting, and they were playing some good Metallica songs. I'm like, man, this reminds me of high school. This music was so good. But if you listen to it all day, every day, it's going to drag you down a little bit. But it was a good reminder.
They were playing in my jukebox there?
Yes, I don't know.
Was there a bunch of kids in there or what?
There were a few. It was Dart League. They had Dart League.
Oh, yeah, sure.
So anyway,
Oh, the dark game, I know. It's not even
so
dark.
some of the radio stations have recognized, hey, we can't take sort of this negative music all the time. We need to have uplifting music, and so they've done that. Some TV stations kind of do that as well, trying to have some more uplifting things. So they've at least picked up on it. Alrighty. Yeah. Another good story I've got. I have a friend. Okay. I have a friend who I knew in a former parish, but I knew her in college beforehand. And she talked about how she sort of had her cell phone and she would do social media and she was kind of connected to that. She had just had a baby, and so she would hold her baby in one hand and her smartphone in the other hand. And there was this sort of tension of like what to spend more attention to. And so she would catch herself regularly like having this draw to need to communicate to other people or see what's going on, or she felt somehow like if she didn't have that connection that she was missing out on something. That was her phrase, she was missing out on something. So that fear of missing out on something made it so she was missing out on the baby that was in her arms, the human being, the life that she was there with. So, but she recognized it. She said, "This is awful." So I think, she fasted from her cell phone, from her smartphone, everything other than calling. Imagine that! What a radical idea! Just using a phone for calling. That's what she did one Lent, and she said it was really really hard. But she turned off her data, so she couldn't. I think she texted, but she couldn't do anything else. She couldn't go online or anything like that. So I thought that was a cool reflection on her part, that she felt like if she didn't have that smartphone, if she wasn't looking at it fairly often, she must be missing out on something. That's a tough fear. And that, by the way, that social fear hasn't happened just recently with social media. That's been going on a long time. You probably experienced that yourself. In whatever social setting, if other people are doing something and you're not invited or you're not there, I feel like I'm afraid I'm missing out on something. Or we go to something because if we don't, we're afraid we're going to miss out on something. So that's something that had happened before. But now with social media, again, it's just ramped up even more. It's even more common and frequent. All right. So in discussion, what do you practice? What do your kids and grandkids practice when it comes to your smartphone and social media? Again, just a caution not to kind of go off on that tendency to just want to complain or look at the negativity. That's what we're trying to not do. That's the problem with social media. But I just want you to have a conversation and talk about what do you do with technology? What do you do with your smartphone? What do you do with social media? What are some things that you see your family doing as well? So, go for it. Alrighty. I'm gonna pull you guys back in. This is my symbol for pulling you guys. No. So tell me a little bit about what you discussed, or what are some things that you do, or some things you've seen your family do, or what are those practices? Oh, you can stop looking at Malcolm. You can look at the questions. But what are some things you've observed, or things that you've done yourself? What are those practices that you have seen or do with your social media?
It's rather addictive, and you can get started and you just want to keep scrolling and scrolling and scrolling.
That's right.
And a lot of things are good. There's prayers on it. There's good things.
I'm glad you mentioned that.
But, it's a waste of time though.
It's designed to be addicting. In college, I remember my friend would talk about, she would waste sometimes a couple hours on YouTube in the afternoons because the related videos are meant to pique your interest in another one.
Yes.
And there can be good things, like if I'm researching a topic on this, I watched a few YouTube videos just about people talking about this. But it's designed to be that way. There's a hipster song I heard recently on one of my hipster music channels, but it's called "Scroll Away My Life with You," and it's talking about like just kind of scrolling away and looking at another person's page, and it was this great critique of, we talk about kind of wasting away my life with you, or I'm trying to think of that phrase, but just to like waste time with the one that you love. To
Like
be with the one
wasted
that you
away
love.
in Margaritaville?
Well, not quite that way. But it was a nice critique of saying like that's the new way of socialization. Like, especially at a younger age, like if you're falling in love with somebody, you're just scrolling away your life with that person. It's like, is that real affection or real human connection? So anyway, it's a fun hipster song. So leave it to the hipsters to be able to come up with
When
something
you go
like
to a
that.
store too, you can see everybody, they got kids along, but they're on their phone.
Sure, yeah,
Well, I know they're probably asking for
sure.
some direction or something.
Yeah, who
And
knows?
it seems like the humans are being
Didn't
ignored.
they, wasn't it like last July 1st or something that went into effect where you're not supposed to be talking on your phone while you're driving?
Yeah,
Is it just texting or is it talking?
different
The
states.
numbers,
Just text
doesn't seem to me like it changed much because you still see everybody driving with their phone.
Yeah, different states and even different cities have different laws on that. So I remember when I was in Dubuque, they had passed a law that there was no talking, and then they backed it up and said no texting. And that was just a city ordinance or a city law or whatever. So there's a few different places that have different laws with that.
But he's right, I bet there's 40% of the people are on the phone.
But it's more than that.
They're probably
Just-
more than that.
Just sit out in front of your house and watch the cars that go by and see how many are on their phone when they're going by. Not the passengers, the
The
driver.
drivers, and I can say this for looking out the window at the salon. It's busy road, Highway 24, and almost every car, there's somebody on their phone.
Especially young ones,
Especially what?
the younger people.
Old people too.
But that's old too.
Older people too. People your age, Robert.
You're probably calling their parents because they haven't talked to them in a long time.
Businessmen, they're heading out of town on a call,
Yeah. Other things you guys have seen or things you practice? I'm going to use an idea that Alyssa gave me, if you don't mind. So she was telling me that on Instagram it's easy to kind of scroll through things. It's similar to Facebook, but more picture oriented. And she'll kind of go through just liking things, and even if she won't even look at it very much, and she'll just like it. And part of the tendency to do that, or temptation to do that, is so that they see that you liked it. And if they see that you liked it, then you're sort of in good. But if I've had this experience before, if I don't like something, if I see something and don't like it, and that person sees that I
didn't connect on it.
not even that I don't like it, but that I didn't click that I liked it, then it's like, oh no, are they gonna be mad at me for that, or are they not, or anyway, so there's this tendency to do that, so we just go through liking things just because that's what we do, or whatever. And so the whole question of how to use this technology to communicate well is confusing because there's no real good etiquette of how to do it. Like if I text somebody, they might expect, or I might expect them to text me back right away. And they might want to think about it for a while, so they don't text me for 2 hours. And I'm like, well, where are they at? They must not care about me. And then I get really mad at that person, but they're just thinking about it. They're not, just ignoring me. They want to take time to think about it. So there can be huge, it's ironic, but with all these forms of communication in social media, there can be profound miscommunication between two people, because there isn't really, we haven't developed an etiquette of how to communicate and express our feelings and express ourselves very well, because everybody has different expectations on how to do this or that, which again isn't just with social media. That's any couple that gets married has to figure out how to bring two different communication styles together. There are different communication styles, but it's again intensified with social media. So okay, I'm going to show one quick video. No, I'm not. We're going to go to break because I love this video and I want time to talk about it afterwards. So I guess before we go to break, does anybody have any questions or thoughts or sarcastic remarks? Yeah.
Emails.
Yeah.
At work, all of our shop manuals and stuff are online now, so
Yeah.
I have to go to the computer to get anything. So now I'm exposed to my email. It's real easy for me to get, because I never used to even check my emails, so I didn't know nothing. But anyway, now I just, when I go check my emails, is there anything I can delete off of there quick,
Right.
But emails, 90% of them or better are just junk, stupid stuff that would not be sent if it wasn't so easy to send an email. It's just,
It isn't important stuff.
yeah, it's just junk. It's like junk mail, except they're not wasting paper to do it, because if they had to fold the thing up and put it in an envelope,
They probably wouldn't send
they
it.
wouldn't send it.
Yeah, that's right. And that's a really good, I liked what you said. It's so much easier to see emails now, and sometimes you can say, well, I'll just check this really quick and get rid of some of the junk that might be on there. And sometimes we can get so tied to that, I'm just gonna check this quick, and then sometimes we get sucked into it and we miss out on other
That's
things.
right.
So on your phone, you can get notifications at the top of your smartphone, and it tells you when you got a text message or a call or an email or whatever. And I finally got sick and tired of, I get a lot of emails, you probably could assume I get a lot of emails throughout the day, but I'd be sitting sort of in my recliner, like reading at the end of the day with my phone next to me, and I could sort of see out of the corner of my eye when that like email thing would pop up. I don't get as many texts or calls, but the emails are kind of always coming in. And so I'd look over, and of course I'd have to check it and maybe see, what is it? I'm curious. And so finally I disabled that notification. It's like, I don't want to know when I get an email. I want to live my life and not have to be tied down to this thing.
And some of those
So I
emails that
finally did
says,
that the other day.
click here if you don't want to get this anymore, but I'm
Right.
scared to do that because I'm scared that if I do that, then it's going to let something into my computer and
Yeah.
screw everything all up.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'd be kind of scared too.
I just say, we got Facebook and I got Brazzle. I just use my phone for texting and calling.
Yeah,
Because I just, I'm crazy.
not a bad
Takes,
idea.
yeah, you're trying to relax and then use your phone.
I don't get a lot of, I don't get them. 'cause
I had actually deleted Snapchat for that same reason, just because I found myself getting so
I'm
attached to
scared if I
that.
accidentally click on
It is fun, it was good for me. So.
Then you have nothing but-
Alrighty, let's go to break. There's some chips and sandwiches and water and coffee. Well, it's actually not bad.
I can't.
My grandmother used to say that. I'll be over there eating. My grandmother used to say, not quite as well as I had hoped. So it gets, like, there's clear pictures sometimes, and then it gets kind of like this sometimes. But the audio is fine. You can hear the audio, and the conversation is the most important thing. How many have seen Jurassic Park? Awesome. So just to give you a sort of brief outline and then where this happens. So, of course, the story of Jurassic Park is this guy finds dinosaur DNA in the blood of a mosquito, and so he makes this whole island with dinosaurs all over it. So it's this amazing technological, scientific discovery. He's got all these different dinosaurs and everything. Then he brings people to this island to kind of talk about how to do this and if it's a good thing and all that type of stuff. So one of the characters is one of the main ones here. His name is Ian Malcolm, and he's I can't remember exactly what his role is. So there's a lawyer that's there. There's like a paleontologist, and then Ian Malcolm is, I think he's supposed to be a promoter. He's supposed to like know how to do sort of social relations and promote things and everything. But anyway, he kind of has a critique of this whole thing, which is, I think, valuable for our discussion. So here's that. They're all sitting down to lunch. They've seen the dinosaurs, they've seen this island and everything, and now they're talking about what to do with all of it. Uh-oh.
Charge anything we want, $2,000 a day.
After that absolutely spectacular design, spared no expense.
We can charge anything we want, $2,000 a day, $10,000 a day, and people will pay it. And then there's the merchandise. And I can personally...
Donald, this park is not built to cater only for the super rich. Everyone in the world has the right to enjoy these animals.
Sure, they will. What, we'll have a coupon day or something.
Gee, the lack of humility before nature that's being displayed here staggers me.
Well, thank you, Dr. Malcolm, but I think things are a little bit different than you and I had feared.
Yeah, I know, they're a lot worse.
Now, wait a second now. We haven't even seen the part where
Don't let him talk. There's no reason. I want to hear a review point. I really do.
Yeah, don't you see the danger, John, inherent in what you're doing here? Genetic power is the most awesome force the planet's ever seen, but you wield it like a kid that's found his dad's gun.
It's hardly appropriate to start hurling generalizations.
If I may, I'll tell you the problem with the scientific power that you're using here. It didn't require any discipline to attain it. You know, you read what others had done, and you took the next step. You didn't earn the knowledge for yourselves, so you don't take any responsibility for it. You stood on the shoulders of geniuses to accomplish something as fast as you could, and before you even knew what you had, you patented it and packaged it and slapped it on a plastic lunchbox, and now you're selling it. You're the seller. Well,
I don't think you're giving us our due credit. Our scientists have done things which nobody's ever done before.
yeah, but your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could that they didn't stop to think if they should.
After that absolutely spectacular design.
So they're talking about the dinosaurs and what's going on there. And of course, Ian Malcolm's critique is this is incredible power that you're taking here, the scientific, genetic ability to create dinosaurs. And so one image that he uses is, you know, you wield this power like a kid that just found his dad's gun or something like that. So he's saying, this is great power, you gotta be careful, there's responsibility here. And so there's some great lines in there. At first I think he says like, the lack of humility before the reality of humanity is staggering or something like that. So he's suggesting there needs to be some humility here, there needs to be some care and responsibility. And so he's saying, well, hey, our scientists have done these things and have done great work on all these things, our scientists. And so at the end he says, the problem with your scientists is they got so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they forgot to stop and ask whether or not they should. Mm-hmm. And so they didn't have any discipline going into it. There wasn't anything there. And perhaps I think that's a great critique of just technological advancement in general. Before we just go and do something, we need a couple things. Number one, we got to ask, what effect is this going to have? How is this going to impact things? Should we even do this? Just because we have the technology to do it, should we do it? Does anybody know how this movie ends, by the way? The dinosaurs eat all of the people. I mean, not all the people, a few escape. Some of the main characters. But yeah, I mean, so he ends up, of course, being right. Like, you got to be careful with this stuff. The other part is, in order to have a certain kind of power at our fingertips, the power to create dinosaurs or whatever, there needs to be some kind of discipline or some kind of responsibility in order to be able to wield it well. Like a child that finds his dad's gun, go through gun safety classes and develop that responsibility or have the ability to be able to use that properly and take responsibility before you just give it to somebody. You know, that's what we do with all kinds of things in life. Perhaps we should have something like that with technology as well. Right now, we seem to be so wrapped up with what we can do with technology. What can we do with smartphones? What can we do with social media? What can we do with technology? That nobody's really stopping to ask, should we do this? What impact is this going to have? How do we use it well? I mean, okay, yeah, I can use it. I can have this on my smartphone and do this and that. But how can I use it well? That takes a lot more. One of the best ways to do this, of course, is trial and error. So maybe we're finding our way. I mean, maybe we're figuring it out. I don't know. That's my hope, at least, is we've got this technology, we've got this power, and we're figuring it out by trial and error. My hope is that that error isn't so great that there's major negative consequences out there. So I don't know. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed Jurassic Park. I love it. It's a great movie. By the way, it was social media that allowed me to be able to get these videos. So it's kind of ironic, isn't it? Okay. Gotta love you. Social media research. So there's a lot of research out there on the effects that social media has on us. So I'm going to go through some of this somewhat quickly. So try not to get too bogged down by it. But okay, the American Psychiatric Association did an analysis that showed that people who reported using the most platforms, 7 to 11 platforms, so that would be like Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, like 7 to 11 platforms, had more than 3 times the risk of depression and anxiety, odds ratio of 3.08 and 3.27 respectively, than people who use the least amount, 0 to 2 platforms. So basically the more platforms of social media you got, the more propensity you have for depression and anxiety. Probably due to some of the things we talked about before. Comparing your life to somebody else whose life looks awesome on Instagram is going to make you depressed because their life looks awesome, and I know my life sucks sometimes. So anyway, that can, but yeah, just that comparison of life, to see different things, to take in negativity, to be consuming a lot of negativity at times, is going to lead to sort of a depression. If you watch the evening news every night and really care about it, you're going to be depressed or mad or both. So you have to, we can care, but we can only care so much sometimes. There's, there's only so much we can do as human beings. So that's one study. The Brain Institute at Pittsburgh University, multitasking, as would happen when switching between platforms, is known to be related to poor cognitive and mental health outcomes. So switching from things often, whether it's communication, between us and then switching here, so I'm emailing and now I'm texting and I'm back, having to switch has been related to poor cognitive and mental health outcomes. The distinct set of unwritten rules, cultural assumptions, and idiosyncrasies of each platform are increasingly difficult to navigate when the number of platforms used rises, which could lead to negative moods and emotions. This is something we talked about a little bit before, when different people have different understandings of how to use these forms of communication. And so when you're switching from one form of communication to another, it's difficult to keep kind of figuring out how to do this. So the way I communicate with somebody through text message is going to be different than how I communicate with them through Instagram. And so I'm trying to figure out how to do that well, and switching between these two forms of communication. That's hard to do. That can lead to miscommunication. Like I said before, if I send a text and somebody doesn't reply for 2 hours, I'm mad because they're obviously ignoring me, obviously. Not like they could actually have a life and be doing something worthwhile instead of responding to me. But there's that disconnect there. There's more opportunity to commit a social faux pas when using multiple platforms, which can lead to repeated embarrassment. And so, again, there's all kinds of different mistakes we can make with social media because we don't understand. There's no etiquette, there's no rules, there's no proper way of communicating. There's no set of rules that you have to adhere by. Everybody has their own set of rules about how you should or should not do this. Another story of after a finance council meeting, I was talking to 2 guys, and they were talking about text messaging, and one was making fun of the other that he'll text him, and then the guy will text back with an answer, and then this guy will text back, but then you won't get an answer for a long time. And basically one guy would use texting for communication like I would talk to you over the phone. I say something, you respond, I'll respond, you respond, and there's constant volleying going on in response. The other one used text only as a form of quick communication. So, if somebody sent him a text, he would answer it and then put his phone down and go do whatever he was doing. He wouldn't check it again after that. He would have answered the question, which is the only reason for the text. And there's no more, if he was saying, if you needed more communication than that, you should have called, not texted. So there's a misunderstanding in how text messaging was going. So this one guy would get mad that he doesn't respond forever, and the other guy gets mad that he didn't just call. Stop texting me, just call me. And we can figure this out. So anyway, that leads to frustration and miscommunication and everything like that. BBC, the British Broadcasting Company. Twitter was found to be a significant contributor because it increased their awareness of people's stress, and contributor of stress, increased stress in life. And so when we have all these forms of media and communication coming in, there are more things to stress out about. Gone are the days when you can just worry about your farm. And you don't have, not even TV, you don't have to worry about what's going on in Mexico or Florida or whatever else. Now, we've got all of these different atrocities going on everywhere, and you scroll for 30 seconds through a Facebook page and you're just inundated with tragedies all over the place, or a news feed from this thing or that thing. It can be overwhelming, so it increases stress. And maybe we're developing, maybe generations down the road, we'll develop a way to be able to appropriately handle all of those things, and we won't stress out so much. But right now, we're not doing a great job of handling all those different things, because we get a lot of different things, and it's easy to say, the world's done for, the sky's falling, we're all done for, and then you just get depressed, and that's not a good thing. In 2014, researchers in Austria found that participants reported lower moods after using Facebook for 20 minutes compared to those who just browsed the internet. So those that just kind of go through the internet looking for information were not quite it didn't show as many signs of lower mood as those using Facebook for 20 minutes. Sometimes there can be a lot of negativity on Facebook. A 2016 study by researchers at Penn State University, suggested that viewing other people's selfies lowered self-esteem because users compare themselves to photos of people looking their happiest. Snapchat's a really good example of that too. Usually you see people doing awesome things, and my friend Deacon Andy Upa was really good at saying, I'm going to Snapchat this to my friends to make my life look awesome. What's that going to do to them? Makes their life look really dull. And they're going to be like, oh man, I'm missing out, or my life's not as good as theirs, or whatever. So that's part of that.
But magazines have been the culprit for people's low self-esteem when every photo is photoshopped.
That's right.
To look their best.
Yeah, again, this isn't new with social media. It's been going on, and even before magazines or print media, people still compare each other and have low self-esteem. Mm-hmm. It's just so much more heightened now with social media. The quantity is so much more. It kind of puts us in a hotbed of these things. So. Research from the University of, anybody want to try? Anyway, Ohio University and University of Iowa. Strathclyde, thank you. Ohio University and the University of Iowa also found that women compare themselves negatively to selfies and other women. So, yeah, Glamour magazines would be a good example of an early form of that, but now it's just
Women's Day.
Yeah.
Cosmopolitan. There's a host.
You're a subscriber, right?
All of the above.
In a study involving 600 adults, roughly a third said social media made them feel negative emotions, mainly frustration, and envy was the main cause of that frustration. Interesting to think about. Mm-hmm. Spending more time on social media, the researchers said, could displace face-to-face interactions and can also make people feel excluded. So it makes you feel isolated, which is, that is kind of shocking to me. A device which is meant to make you feel more connected actually makes you feel more isolated. Why? Because this group of friends is doing that, and I'm not there. And so I'm all by myself, and they're all doing this fun stuff, or whatever. So.
Just a thought. You're having this class, all of us are on our smartphones, and you're talking to us through the phone. We're all in this room, but we're all learning about it through our phones.
Yeah. I could just be at home right now and be on my phone and teaching all these other things. Well, I did that one time with a book study. I was on retreat, so I just recorded myself on my phone, and we showed that video. It's It's kind of nice.
It just wasn't the same.
It wasn't the same. Yeah, no, it wasn't for me either. I was just praying in a chapel at that time. Researchers found an imbalance in the brain chemistry of young people addicted to smartphones and the internet, according to a study presented today. I don't remember when I got this information or when the article was published, but I think it was within the last couple of years. The annual meeting of Radiology Society of North America. So it is addictive in different ways, and I'll show you a short video here in a bit about how different images and seeing different things in social media actually cause a physiological response in our brain, releasing different chemicals that are sort of feel-good chemicals or make us feel good about ourselves and stuff like that. And you become addicted to it, not unlike some actual drugs that you can get addicted to, which release the same kind of chemicals. New research estimates that 136 billion porn videos will be watched on smartphones this year, with the number rising by 55% over the next 5 years. So just the sheer access to any sort of information over smartphones is, it's unfiltered. I mean, it's just totally out there and you can have access to anything. And that's the sort of lie, is like, true freedom, and like to be free, you've got to be able to have access to everything and do anything you want. Well, some of this stuff shouldn't be accessed. Like, some of this stuff is not good for us. And so,
how to make a bound.
right, yeah. I mean, so there's a problem with that. Effect on youth and children. So listening, girls? Tablets are the ultimate shortcut tools. Unlike a mother reading a story to a child, for example, a smartphone-told story spoon-feeds images, words, and pictures all at once to a young reader. Rather than having to take the time to process a mother's voice into words, visualize complete pictures, and exert the mental effort to follow a storyline, kids who follow stories on their smartphones get lazy. The device does the thinking for them, and as a result, their own cognitive muscles remain weak. That was a psychologist who made that statement. This is so easy to do sometimes, I think, for parents. So like in vans and stuff, you got like a TV screen, the kids can watch that and stuff, and that's pretty good and helpful. But I remember, like, going on road trips with my brother and stuff, there was some conversation going on, and yeah, maybe it was like, be quiet or I'll turn this car around or whatever. But there was something, there was a relationship, and you put up with each other and you did your thing, and that's just the way it was. But more than that, like my friend that I was telling you before, she'd have her baby in one arm and a smartphone in the other, she would do that. Well, it also happens with smaller children. It's like, okay, how am I need to cook dinner, so here's a tablet for my kid, and I'm just gonna cook dinner. Instead of like taking my kid saying, hey, look what I'm doing, or they want to push the chair over to the stove and stand on there and see what's going on. Like, there's interaction, there's learning, there's love. I mean, we're losing that. I'm sorry, I shouldn't be complaining. I'm not complaining. but there is a fear with that, and Dr.
But there were more than just two in the backseat.
Right. You definitely have a lot more than two in the backseat. So, Phyllis, yeah.
I'm fearful of
And no such thing as teaching.
Sure.
all the video games on the computer.
Yeah.
They play and play and play, and there's so much violence in them.
Yeah.
It makes killing just fun.
Yep. We could have a whole.
That's what I'm scared of, because they see how easy it is to kill somebody.
Sure.
Just how they're done, and
Yeah.
then if they go in real life,
Right.
I'm
Then
afraid
how much
it
easier is
numbs
it?
their mentality for
We could-
real life killing.
We could have a whole nother session
I
on
know.
violence on TV and video
I
games and
think,
stuff.
yeah, I think that already has happened.
Could be.
Yeah.
Alrighty, here's a video on, we're gonna watch.
Woke us up.
Again, there's a great irony here that I'm talking about, like video, like you give kids like a tablet or whatever, they watch a video and it makes them dumber. Okay, now we're gonna watch a video, everyone. This one is how smartphones are like cocaine to children. Isn't that dramatic? Oh, too low. videos that kids see and kind of that connectivity, it affects the prefrontal cortex, especially at developing stages. That can be a major part of their life. So this is kind of making that connection. This doesn't mean if your kid or grandkid watches like videos or Snapchats that they're going to be a coke addict. All right, that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. But it can be addicting like that because of the different dopamine levels and the norepinephrine that are released in the brain to kind of make you connected to different.
Was that 8 hours a day on a tablet or with the TV?
That's unclear to me. I don't know for sure.
Oh.
I would assume with the TV. I don't think. And I don't think that would be all of them either. But anyway. Okay, I want to kind of get through some things quick because there are positive things at the end of this, by the way. It's not just like a big downer about our social culture and stuff. Alrighty, so anybody know the story of the Trojan horse? What happened in that story? What happened? Help me out.
People come out of it. Well, they hid in the horse. The horse was supposed to be a present, and then they attacked and slaughtered them. So that's why our students are always mad that we're the Trojans. They're like, we're on the wrong.
That's kind of funny, yeah.
We're on the wrong end of the battle here.
That's a good point. I haven't thought about that. We should be the Greeks, right? The Greeks are the one that.
I never made that connection.
So the Greeks take the Trojan horse, and it's after like 30 years of fighting or whatever, tons of years of fighting. So the Greeks are like, hey, we got an idea. Let's give them this horse that seems like a great gift. And as soon as they open their door to it, they've let us in, and we can tear them apart as soon as they open the door. Technology, smartphones in our homes, in our lives, as soon as we open the door to it, seems like a great gift. A lot of good things going on there. Pretty awesome things, a way to communicate, share pictures and stuff. But as soon as we open our door to that, it can begin to tear things apart. So,
the Trojan horse was too big to get through the door too, wasn't it?
well, in this picture he is.
I think in actuality it was. They had to destroy the door to get it in, so then the door was wide open for.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's interesting. So there you go. So it destroyed the door. So the idea is like, keep your door intact. Like you can let some things in and stuff, but you gotta be able to, yeah. So anyway. Or don't open your door at all, or whatever. Okay, where are we at? All right. There is a really cool book out there written by a neuroscientist named Nicholas Carr. It's called The Shallows, What the Internet is Doing to Our Brains. A few things that Nicholas Carr puts out in this book. So he's a brain scientist that looked at different effects the internet and social media has on our brains. And he talked about something called neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is like jumping from one thing to another and how that affects our brain and our human development. He recognized that brain chemicals are released and the use of different areas of our brain. So he would take brain scans of people using the internet, of using social media and all those types of things. And he would look at brain scans and what areas of the brain were lighting up, what areas weren't, what chemicals were being released, what weren't. So he was kind of interested from that kind of perspective. So basically what he was looking at is when you're doing that kind of activity, social media, internet, smartphone using, what are the areas that are, what are we exercising in social media and what does not get exercised? So what parts of the brain does light up and what parts of the brain don't? This is what he found. We train our brains to take information very quickly and small bits at a time. We can multitask really well. So the areas of our brain that are good with multitasking and taking in small bits of information were really good, like great exercising going on there. Those areas were lighting up. However, we atrophy in contemplation, deep thinking, problem solving, and empathy. These deeper sort of things that allow us to communicate. We might be able to take in small bits of information and kind of, do all these small bits and do it quickly, take that information in quickly. However, we're not very good at really contemplating something, really thinking about something on a deeper level. We're not able to problem solve these complex situations that come up. We weren't using those parts of our brain to be able to get into deep problem solving, or even have empathy or connection with some sort of situation. If you're taking in all this information, your brain can't respond with much care because it's got all these things it has to care about, so it can only care about it on a surface level. So a deeper empathy and sympathy for different things, that media that you're taking in, sort of wasn't lining up because you couldn't do that. It sort of stayed on the loose level. That's why the book is called The Shallows. It's suggesting that when being on social media, it kind of keeps us on the shallow level of existence. It keeps us from being able to go to a deeper level. We lose the ability to pay deep attention to one thing over a long period of time, like paying attention to a book for a long period of time. Sometimes I'll read 3 pages and be like, okay, I'm done with that. Or like I'll watch 5 minutes of something on TV, okay, I'm done with that. Sometimes we're training ourselves to not be able to actually spend a long amount of time doing one thing, a long period of time. Life situations, not being able to pay attention to different life situations, or just another person. We get bored with a person after a while. We look for somebody else to go talk to. Why? Because that's what we do in social media. Okay, I've sent this person a message, and I'm going to talk to somebody else and go from there to there. We training a brain like the training of an athlete. So an athlete will have to train certain muscles to get stronger, to be good at what they're doing. And if there's certain things that go on and certain muscles get weaker, that person's not going to be very good. Same thing happens with our brain and social media. So he's suggesting, let me make sure I don't have any more. Okay, good. He's suggesting that what we're doing when we use social media, the internet, is we're training our brain to just operate on a very surface level and a shallow level. We're unable to go into deeper relationship, deeper connection, deeper thought, and we just sort of stay on that shallow end. So he was kind of concerned about that, and that's basically his thesis of his book. So anyway, and he based that entirely on not social data, but scientific data, brain scans and stuff.
Does that mean dementia's going to become more and more prominent?
I couldn't answer that question for you. It would depend on what the cause of dementia is. And I'm a priest, not a doctor. It could be. There's a movie out there called The Gods Must Be Crazy. Has anyone ever seen it? It's a really lame movie. It's a I think it was South African movie. And it's like a comedy sort of. Anyway, I don't recommend watching it. I don't think it's all that great of a movie, but it's got an interesting point to it. I think it's a neat. So what happens is there's this tribe in Africa that there's a plane flying over and a guy throws an empty Coke bottle, glass Coke bottle, out of the window, and it lands where this tribe is at. This tribe doesn't have any connection, no real technology, not even really any tools. So they've got this Coca-Cola bottle, and they find out this is really valuable for doing different things. And so some of them start using it for this, and then somebody else is like, well, I want to use that, and so I'm gonna use it for this other thing. And they keep like everyone in the tribe now wants this new tool, technology to use, and it starts tearing apart that community or that tribe. So the movie is basically this guy whose job it is to go take this bottle to the end of the earth, like a cliff, and to throw it off there because it's destroying our community. And so here's this technology they got, but it's tearing apart this tribe, and so they decide, well, let's get rid of it. Even though it was helping them do things they couldn't have done before. They use it to like open up a coconut or something, they stab it in the coconut, they can break it apart. There's all these different things they do with it. But they're like, no, if this is going to tear us apart, we're getting rid of it. So that brings up so there he is at the end of the world, getting rid of the Coke bottle. He's throwing it 'cause it's useless. So that brings up a good discussion. Do we need to throw our smartphones out the window or off the edge of the world or off the edge of the cliff? Scripture tells us, I think it's in Matthew, if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off. Does that directly apply? Or anyway, discuss at your tables. What's your thoughts? Do we need to throw our smartphones out the window and get rid of the internet forever? Alrighty, I'm going to bring you on back. Just gather it all back together again. What are some of your thoughts? Do we need to get rid of it forever and just exercise it from our society? Or keep it, it's a good thing? Or what are some of your thoughts? Yeah.
It might be good to have it just for some information, but everything else can go.
Nice. It might be good to have it for some information, but everything else can go. Cool.
I think moderation is the key.
Nice.
You use it when you need it.
How did it ever get allowed in the school? How did that ever happen?
I don't think it was never, first of all, it was never disallowed.
Oh,
and
really?
so, I mean, like, when I was growing up,
But
What
why did
was
they do
different
this?
than when I was growing up?
we didn't have cell phones I think I got my first cell phone senior year in high school it was, and very few kids had it. So there was no school policy on cell phones in school because none of the kids had cell phones.
What do they
Now
use?
all of a sudden the kids
What do they use
start
there
bringing-
for in the first place?
Parents might want to contact kids if there's an emergency.
A cell phone for an emergency situation, that's why I got one in the first place. I mean, it's ideal for that. The problem is, it gets abused for all this other stuff.
That's right, and that's the great Trojan horse
Yeah.
analogy is, I'll have this for emergencies, and then there's all this other stuff. Or I'll have this for some communication, but then all this other stuff kind of sucks me in, gets me in there, so moderation.
And when I was in school, parents were able to get a hold of their kids by calling school.
Crazy idea, isn't it?
But up at Turkey Valley, they got, like at parent-teacher conferences, I noticed these things on the wall by the door with all the pockets in. And I asked, well, what is this for? And they said, well, everybody puts their cell phones in there when they come to class, and then when they leave, I think that's an excellent idea, because they can't be messing with it, but yet they have access to it if there's a school shooting or some stupid thing like that.
Yeah, the girls were telling me each teacher kind of has a different sort of policy on different things, so some probably do make you put your phone in wherever. So
I think they should.
it's hard to figure out what to do.
It's nice to have them in case we have an emergency.
Sure,
I will say
that's
that.
right.
Because years ago, we had no communication. It had to be the mother or father at the end of the lane that we could get communication back to the school.
Yeah.
You know, but, you know, as of now, we can't use it, but the kids could come back. Because we get fined.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
can
There's no doubt there are legitimately good uses or good things about it. So the challenge is that it's so easy to get sucked in by everything else. So I think it's spot on to say moderation or to say it's good for some things, but then all that other stuff just get rid of. It's easy to say that. It's really hard to do that. And that's true in a lot of different areas in life as well. To say, well, we do that all the time. We say, well, I'll just do this, or I'm just going to do that, or whatever. I'm just going to have one more potato chip. Now the bowl's gone. You know, it's like it's so easy to say, well, I'm just gonna consume what I need to, and then that's enough. But then to actually do that is a whole different thing. So that self-discipline, that moderation, I think that's spot on. But the kind of question is how sort of parental things. That's a big question I have for a lot of couples. Sometimes if I'm with a young couple who has young kids. A lot of times, if it's just a social setting, I'll ask them, you know, what are your plans for your kids and phones? Are they going to have their own phone? Are they going to have, you know, regulations? Or what are your thoughts? And so I'm glad I'm not a parent. So that's a tough challenge. I don't know what I would do. I don't know what the right answer is, but we have to be careful because the danger is so dangerous. One of the video that said it's as addictive as cocaine. Okay, that's very dramatic. But like there's this school that's a low-tech school. Steve Jobs was a low-tech parent, even though Steve Jobs was the creator of Microsoft. Is that right? Okay. So yeah, I mean, they recognize the danger with these sorts of things. So they're doing what they can. There are places in the world that are picking up on this and saying, okay, we need to do what we can to fight that. So yeah. Good luck, parents. I'll pray for you.
That's where he's leaving us.
No, just be careful and don't be afraid to drop the hammer on things like this because it could be dangerous. Good things. All right. Chick-fil-A had the family challenge. So here's the box. They had this family challenge. So you go into a Chick-fil-A and you get like a 10% discount. Maybe I'll have it. Okay. So what you do is you turn all the family cell phones to silent and place the cell phones in the phone coop. So that's the phone coop. So you all put them in and it's chicken. You see the chicken wire? Yes, that's the chicken wire.
Not the co-op.
All right, so everybody puts in there. Then you enjoy your Chick-fil-A meal and each other distraction-free. What a crazy idea. Everybody's got their phones in there. You don't worry about it. After the meal, you let the Chick-fil-A know that your family had successfully completed the challenge, and each of you will receive a small ice cream cone. So you get that free dessert if you actually spend time.
Cute idea. I think it's
Well, that's
a
what
cute
we'll come
idea.
to when we're giving people ice cream so that they don't really actually pay attention to each other, you know? But it's cool. Chick-fil-A's figured this out. Chick-fil-A is a great corporation for a lot of reasons, not just this, but they're great, family-oriented. They're closed on Sundays, I think. They're awesome. So eat more chicken. Like the cows say on the commercials. Okay. WNYC, I think that's a radio station in New York City, on February 2nd, 2015, put out a challenge, which started February 2nd. To help you put down the phone, they've made a list of 18 places you can survive without it. Social media, they also said social media away messages. So when somebody would send you something on social media, it would send an away message. I'm not on my Facebook, I'm not on my texting, all that type of stuff. And compiled a bored but not boring reading list for people to actually do. So they gave a challenge to the whole city to do these different things for a particular amount of time. I didn't hear how it went, but what a cool thing. New York City is saying, hey, when you're walking on the streets, you don't need to do it there. So 18 places you can do without your phone, and then not contacting social media and stuff. So it's kind of a cool secular thing that the world's saying, hey, maybe there's a value to developing this a little bit.
I want to add to that. Church is a good place.
Yeah.
Because we can't get
That's right.
connection right
Well, that's right. Yeah, here especially. Jamming, we'll have like
God
internet
has a way
jamming
of
messages.
teaching
Yeah,
us.
that's right. Parents' rules. This was on a website that I found. These were the 5 most common and most used parental rules for phones and stuff. No phones in your bedroom at night. No phones at school. No phone during mealtime or family time. No picture emails. I think Snapchat would fall under that category. And monitor contacts and friends. Making sure their friends are real friends, not fake friends that are predators of some sort, and monitoring the contacts that they have. So those are the 5 most common or 5 most helpful parental rules that were out there. All right. There's lots of Catholic apps out there that you can download on your phone to help out your spiritual life. So one thing that smartphones are really good at is sort of keeping your attention or keeping something at your attention. Sometimes it's too good, like email, where it's like, I don't care like if somebody sent me an email, I want to just live my life. But when it comes to spiritual things, like when I need to pray or things that I might want to read or something like that, these can be a good way of holding ourselves accountable to say, oh yeah, that's right, I need to pray now, or there's this saint's feast day that's today, and that it brings it to your attention. It's like, oh, okay, I'll pray to that saint today because I didn't know that before. So one of the Catholic apps that's out there is called Laudate. It's a single source app for a variety of Catholic needs. I won't read the whole thing to you, but it's got tons on it. It's got Stations of the Cross. It's got the readings for the day. It's got the breviary prayers of the Psalms for every day. It's got a lot of other things. I think just hymns, like you can listen to church hymns. How lame is that? No, I mean, but imagine how different your day might be. Like if you're getting ready for the day, you're brushing your teeth, instead of listening to the local radio station, you're listening to church hymns. I don't know. I don't do that, but you can. And some of it can be. I've done it before with reading. Sometimes I'll read if I'm reading some kind of spiritual book or something. I'll listen to chant or music like that. So Laudate is a great app. Catholic News Agency. We talk about filtering our news all the time, which generally isn't a good thing because you don't get a well-rounded sort of thing. But it's good to get some good Catholic news in there. So that's something you can have come up on your app. What's the Pope saying today? So earlier today, he would have had his Sunday Angelus. So he would have had a message that he spoke to the crowd in St. Peter's. That it would notify you of that and say, hey, here's what the Pope had to say. Now you actually have to read it, and it's, probably somewhat of a lengthy thing, which is kind of funny because that's not how apps usually work. They just give you like short sound bites. Twitter is that you can only have so many characters. When you tweet something, you only get, you girls know how many characters it is? It's not many. But the whole idea is that we can't handle, more information than just that many. It's just a quick thing. It's out there, it's done, whatever. Whereas this, you'd actually have to take the time to read it and everything. So it's almost an identity crisis. It's an app, but it's an app you actually have to read and take time with. So it is what it is. There's like the iConfession app or the iConfess app or different confession apps that take you through the process step by step of going to confession. So it takes you through a menu of sins. It's pretty, and you can like check off. It's like, yeah, done that, yeah, twice last week, okay, you know, like, but you can actually have that, and then you can take that into the confessional. I've had this happen before. They bring their smartphone into the confessional, and initially it's like, what's going on? And I freak out because like I think about somebody recording something or whatever. That's not a good thing. But anyway, usually I'll be like, okay, you know, we usually don't allow, you know, cell phone access. I'm like, oh, you know, this is my iConfess app. And, oh, okay. And so they'll scroll through and say, okay, yeah, this, that. And it gives you an examination of conscience, or sort of an examination of yourself based on the sins that you've chosen. It'll be a writing of a saint who talks about pride, or the writing of a pope that talks about envy, or something like that. And it'll give you stuff to like struggle with it. So if you've got a bad priest in the confessional who's just like, okay, pray, you know, you confess your sins, like, okay, pray 5 Hail Marys, now say an act of contrition. This will at least give you something you can read to try to, you know, to become better or whatever. So, anyway, it's a neat app. There was one more app that there's an app out there called Sinner to Saint, and it has all these like daily challenges that take you, I think through like a couple of years or something like that, and they keep challenging you to develop your faith more, to learn more, to practice more, to do different things. So it's called Sinner to Saint. I thought that was a good title. But again, it keeps it at the forefront of your mind. Hey, I should be doing these things. I should be practicing these things. All right, here we are. This is the end. Oh, not quite the end. Smartphones and social media, good or bad? What are your thoughts?
Both.
Both. Okay. Why?
They're necessary for certain things, but not necessary for a lot of things.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, they're good when used properly, but they're bad when they're abused.
Yeah.
Just like anything else.
Bingo. That's it. And that's the great thing is we look at smartphones like they're the devil. The smartphones are not the devil. It can become a tool just like anything. Anything can be distorted. Anything can be used improperly. Anything can become a problem. So I think that's a helpful thing. Like we look at smartphones like, oh no, what are we gonna do? And it's the same sort of way we deal with any temptation or any sin or any tool that's out there that we could misuse. We have to be careful in dealing with this as well. A cell phone in and of itself is not good or bad. However, I will say the way technology has advanced so quickly, some of the tendencies or the propensities to fall into vice or into sin when using it are a little bit more than like, okay, a hammer. I could use a hammer to build a birdhouse or to like put in somebody's skull. So that could be used for a good or a bad thing or whatever. But the temptation I have when I hold a hammer to, you know, put that through my brother's skull or whatever is not a very big temptation usually, unless he's making me mad. But with the cell phone, there's a lot, or with social media, there's a lot more temptation. It's a lot easier to get tempted. It actually has a propensity to kind of do that. But I think it's helpful to say this is a tool, this is an instrument, just like anything else, that can be used for good or evil. And so that brings me to my final video.
There's also been, so many people that didn't grow up with the technology and things like that, and it's like, go to this website and that, and they don't have access. It's like kind of a way of discrimination or.
Right. Yeah, like cyberbullying is a big. Do you guys think cyberbullying is that a big problem? Do you guys know of a lot of that going on?
No, because I just don't have that on my phone.
Okay, good. Yeah, I haven't gotten the impression that it's a huge thing, but it could happen. I mean, it's a lot easier to be able to do something like that.
It's there.
It's there. It's there. Alrighty. Final video.
Today.
Before I go to this, so there's a commercial that's out there. You might have seen this, but I think it's for Microsoft. But it's kind of cool how it talks about. It really applies very well to what we.
Today, right now, you have more power at your fingertips than entire generations that came before you. Think about that. That's what technology really is. It's possibility, it's adaptability, it's capability. But in the end, it's only a tool. What's a hammer without a person who swings it? It's not about what technology can do, it's about what you can do with it. You're the voice. and it's the microphone. When you're the artist, it's the paintbrush. We are living in the future we always dreamed of. We have mixed reality that changes how we see the world, and AI empowering us to change the world we see. You have more power at your fingertips than entire generations that came before you. So here's the question. What will you do with it?
Talk about getting everybody to like bow to the totem of technology, right? But I think he brings up a couple great points. One is that we have the power at our fingertips of more than most generations before us, just at our fingertips with that information, the ability to do different things. That's a huge amount of power. But then he starts talking about how it's a tool, it's an instrument, okay? We're the ones that choose how to use it and what to do with it. And so at the very end, he says, the question is, what will you do with it? That's the big question. I mean, there is incredible power in smartphones and in social media and all those types of things. And that power can go one way or another. It's like anything. St. Thomas Aquinas has this great analogy of different things that have power. So he talks about our emotions especially, but I think it could be used for smartphones and for social media and everything. And he uses the example of horses and a charioteer. So you can be sitting in a chariot, you've got two horses up there, and those horses have great power. They're strong, they can take you pretty awesome places. If you need to get from this town to that town, they'll take you there, and they can take you fast, a lot faster than we could, because they've got more power. But you have to have control of the reins. You've got to be able to direct those horses. You have to direct that power to be able to get you there. If you don't have hold of the reins, those horses could lead to destruction. They're going to run you off a cliff or in the wrong direction or wherever it might be. So you've got to be able to have control of that and to use that power, to harness that power to do what you want it to do, not the other way around. Of course, we talk about, hey, I possess a smartphone. Do I possess the smartphone, or does the smartphone possess me? Is it the one controlling me? I think that's a fair question. So St. Thomas Aquinas gives us a good thing. That power is power to be able to communicate, socialize. Going back to the beginning of the presentation, we are social beings. We need socialization. Socialization is good for us, for our families, for our communities. But only when it's done, when it's used in a constructive way. That socialization can also be done in an ugly way as well. So this is power to do that, and we can do it in a good way, or it can be done in a bad way. So just like anything, it's an instrument, but it's a much more powerful instrument than we've had in the past. So we've just got to be on the cutting edge, and we have to be so careful, and we have to be so ahead of the game to make sure that we're using it well and using it right. Going back to Dr. Malcolm's example in Jurassic Park, the lack of humility in the face of humanity is staggering. We can't lack that humility to say, this is huge power, and we have to humbly wield this to say, is this the right thing? Can I do this or that? And all those types of things. So, okay, that's probably enough. So, that's all I got for you. That's it. You can continue to have conversations. But I guess a couple encouragements that I would have is two things. Number one, maybe not to sort of be fearful of it, because it is just like any other technology. A lot of technologies have come up and they've been great for our society. And we can't be so afraid of it not to do something or to talk about a constructive way to do it. So with your families, in your communities, talk to them about it. Talk to them about the right way to use this, the wrong way to use this. Is this making me a better human being? Is this making our relationship stronger? Is this making our kids or grandkids better people? Have those conversations. Yeah, I guess that's all it would be. And be brutally honest with yourself as well, to say, no, this is not making me a better person. This is just, I'm just wasting my time here or whatever. And then do what you have to do to make sure that doesn't happen. So, let me give you my blessing. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Heavenly Father, we know that all power belongs to you, and that you created us for goodness, for happiness, and for joy. We thank you for the sciences and for technology, which give us the ability to live our lives well. We ask that we might be responsible stewards of the sciences and of technology, that we may not use those for our own wants and desires, but we use them for the greater good and for your greater glory. And may Almighty God bless you, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Have a great day.